The Night Bulletin presents The Apartment, written and read by TF Ahmad. For a while, there were no tenants in the apartment. It gathered dust over the course of 4 weeks before the building manager came in using his master key. He dusted all of the corners and wiped the floors clean. He gathered stray bits of detritus left from the last visit. He shined the kitchen appliances and bathroom fixtures, taking care to sweep the medicine cabinet. He replaced previous bug traps with new ones and ran a wet wipe around all of the windows. He swept the rear staircase and cleared the leaves, placing them in large paper bags for recycling. The used paper towels and wipes went into the trash. The mop, broom, and vacuum cleaner went back to the maintenance closet. The building manager left, only to return next month to dance the same dance of cleanliness. This routine happened a few times before people entered the apartment. They always came in pairs, sometimes romantically, sometimes platonically. Their genders were never remembered. They were always accompanied by the building manager, who let the couples touch the walls and test the outlets and survey the cabinet space. The apartment listened as these tenants commented on the size and the open concept of the space, whatever that meant. After a few of these tours, the apartment was unoccupied for a while. Rain and wind rattled the windows, as did the passing elevated train, the windows shaking in their frames with a perverse rhythm. The floors gathered dust once more, the corners gathered cobwebs, and the insect traps ensconced insects in their tombs. Then one day, the building manager came in for his monthly cleaning, only to linger over every surface. He scrubbed the floors with more force. He checked and rechecked the medicine cabinet after wiping it down. He sprayed a heavy industrial cleaner on all of the windows before wiping them with furious circular motions. The apartment sat silent, like it did every other time the building manager had occupied its walls. Very soon after that, the door swung open to reveal a couple, clean and fresh. The man was taller than the woman by almost a foot. They both wore hiking backpacks filled to the brim. The man held a large cardboard box that appeared heavy, while the woman dragged a large rolling suitcase behind her. They deposited their parcels on the clean floor. It had rained the previous day. The squeak of their thick-soled boots on the hardwood was the first sound the apartment made since the building manager had been there. The apartment felt the haphazard steps of these new occupants in contrast to the building manager's sure-footed steps. The couple exited in animated conversation, and the apartment was silent once more. They emerged minutes later, holding a large round bundle between the two of them. "Over there," the man said with authority. "In that corner over there." His heavy breathing and booming voice echoed off the bare white walls. "I'm slipping," the woman said. "Just 1 second," the man said, grunting with effort as he moved to help. The bundle landed on the floor with a loud thud. The apartment shook. The woman shrieked. The man groaned in frustration. These sounds and vibrations echoed for several seconds. "It's okay," the man said, unrolling the bundle. "I can slide it from here." He unrolled the bundle to reveal a sleek white sleeping mat. He pushed it into the northwest corner of the room. The apartment felt the weight of this mat, though it was small compared to the furniture that had previously occupied this apartment. The couple removed their boots and jackets and sat upon the mattress, the woman's head against her partner's shoulder. They sat in silence, punctuated by occasional drifts into conversation. Their voices were tired and heavy. Through this fog of conversation, the apartment heard their names, Rick and Cora. Cora rifled through one of the bags and produced a smaller bag. She then began to remove items from the bag, taking them with her into the bathroom. The shower gurgled to life with a hesitation only present after many months of disuse. Rick called someone on his cell phone. He then removed a large pipe from his bag and cracked open a window. He carefully dropped some marijuana into his pipe and smoked it with gravity. He blew the smoke out of the window. The apartment building sighed. Cora turned the shower off and busied herself in the bathroom. Rick sat on the bed, playing music from his phone. There was a knock on the door. He answered it, spoke to the man on the other side, and came back into the apartment with a large pizza. He placed it on the kitchen counter. Cora exited the bathroom in a robe. Her thick socks muted her footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Pizza's here," Rick said. Cora looked around the apartment, empty no longer, and went into the kitchen. Rick awoke at 2 in the morning and used the bathroom. When he returned to bed, Cora was awake. She was looking at her phone, scrolling with her index finger. The screen lit up her face and the rest of the room in a harsh white glow. "Can't sleep?" Rick asked. Cora did not turn her attention away from her phone. "Yeah." "Do you want to have sex?" Rick asked. Cora said nothing. Rick stared back for a few minutes, his breathing deep and even. He then turned over and fell back asleep, his back to Cora. The first thing they bought was a dresser. Rick and another man brought the bulky mahogany piece in through the front door. They were careful, but the door frame did not escape unfazed. The apartment did not protest as the heavy dresser was dragged along the hardwood floor and pushed into the large, deep closet. "There," said the man. "First piece of furniture. You two are off to a great start." Rick did not respond, unsure if the man was making fun of him. The apartment felt the weight of the dresser and approved of its placement. Over the course of the next few weeks, the studio apartment began to fill up with furniture. The sleeping pad was replaced with a bed frame and queen-sized mattress. The dresser and closet were filled with clothing. A couch, 2 chairs, and a coffee table were anchored in one corner of the apartment with a large white rug. A large credenza with a TV and record player were strategically placed on one wall. A desk was added, as well as a small bookshelf. The kitchen was filled with food, utensils, and appliances. The apartment felt the weight of each item, felt its presence and its shape. It was good to have furniture again. It was also good to have people again. But the apartment felt something odd. It was not sure, but it had a feeling that something was not quite right. It had its answer soon. Rick and Cora had a housewarming party about 1 month after moving in. The apartment approved. Housewarming parties were its favorite kinds of parties after children's birthdays. Hours before the first guests arrived, Rick and Cora had an argument. This wasn't the first argument the apartment had witnessed between the two, but the frequency of these arguments was concerning. Rick was sitting by the open window, smoking marijuana. A draft kept pushing the smoke back into his face and into the apartment. "Would you stop doing that for just 1 second?" Cora asked. "You're stinking up the place." "Calm down," Rick said, waving his hand ineffectually. "The smell never lingers." "Yeah, but what if the neighbors smell it? You know we're not allowed to smoke in here." Rick waved his hand again, only this time it was to dismiss Cora. "It's fine. No one can smell it. And even if they can, they won't say shit. Everyone will just keep to themselves." "You don't know that," Cora said, retrieving an aerosol can of air freshener and spraying it liberally in Rick's direction. "Would you cut that out?" Rick said. "I will if you smoke on the back steps." Rick heaved a frustrated sigh. "It's too windy to smoke out there. I can't light the damn bowl." Cora went to the window and closed it. "Then don't smoke right now. I need your help anyways. There are still dishes on the drying rack that need to be put away. And can you please change into a nicer shirt?" Rick rolled his eyes and went to complete his tasks. The apartment did what it could to cleanse the air. It did not like marijuana smoke choking its interior, but it supposed it couldn't dictate the habits of its tenants. The small studio apartment was soon filled with about a half-dozen people milling about. Most sat on the couch, but some sat on the bed, while others wandered into the kitchen in search of food and beer. The apartment accepted a few gracious gifts from these guests, including a houseplant and a massive book of architectural photographs. Cora spent most of her time talking with the man who had helped Rick with the dresser several weeks ago. Rick spent most of his time blowing smoke out of the window and loudly discussing how noisy the neighborhood was. As he spoke, the train grinded along its tracks nearby, causing the windows to rattle in their frames and the party guests to all wince simultaneously. "Would you close that fucking window?" Cora called from across the room. Rick glared openly at his girlfriend before slamming the window shut. The room was silent. The record on the turntable had been in the middle of a song, but the apartment created a minor glitch in the electrical outlet, causing the record player to stop. It wanted the silence. It wanted everybody to stare at Rick. The apartment did not like Rick. After a beat, one of the party guests cracked open a beer and took a loud sip. He belched and said, "What happened to the music?" This broke the tension, and Cora stood up to fix the record player. 2 people on the couch gave each other a quick look before hiding their expressions behind their drinks. The belcher helped Cora with the record player. The man Cora had been talking to busied himself on his phone. The apartment held its breath, waiting to see if Rick would say or do anything. The record player burst to life. The pounding drums and screeching guitar of the Black Keys poured out of the speakers once more. Everyone resumed their conversations as if nothing had happened. Later that night, Rick and Cora were sitting up in bed, each scrolling through their phones in the dark. Their faces were lit by their screens, shadows occasionally dancing off their features. Cora put in her headphones and tilted her screen. Rick quickly glanced in her direction, but he couldn't make out what she was watching. He pointedly put his phone down and stared into the darkness. It took over 5 minutes before Cora finished her video and noticed Rick's expression. "What's wrong, Rick?" Cora asked, pulling her headphones from her ears. Rick said nothing, his arms now crossed over his chest. "What's wrong?" she asked again, annoyed. "Nothing," Rick said. His voice was so quiet, Cora swiped at her ears to make sure she still didn't have her headphones in. Cora was about to say something snarky when Rick spoke up. "What were you and Hal talking about all night?" So the apartment now had a name for the man who helped Rick with the dresser. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," he said. "You two were speaking in hushed voices, like you had some secret." Cora said nothing. She knew what Rick was driving at. "It was nothing," she said. "We were just talking about college." "I don't believe you," Rick said. "What do you think we were talking about?" Cora said, her voice rising. "Want to take a guess? Do you think we were whispering sweet nothings to each other?" Rick slapped her. It was quick and sharp. The sound of open palm against cheek was like a gunshot in the apartment. In the silence that followed, the apartment groaned and leaned on its foundation, a witness to the sudden violence. Cora began to shake and sob, her back to Rick and her hand on her face. Rick was shaking as well, though it was from anger rather than fear. "This is nothing like last time," Cora said quietly. "That was a mistake, and I already promised it would never happen again." Rick leaned in. "You have to be careful," he said. "It's hard for me to know what you're doing when you talk to other people." "So I shouldn't talk to anybody?" "Yeah, that's reasonable." "Just don't talk to Hal anymore," Rick said. "That's all I ask." Rick rose from the bed and started dressing. He put his shoes on and wrapped a light jacket around his shoulders. "Where are you going?" Cora asked. "Out," Rick said. "To get drunk." With that, he slammed the door. The apartment stilled the rattling immediately. Cora sat in bed for a while. She couldn't understand Rick's behavior. This move was supposed to be good for them. They were supposed to have left their mistakes behind, but it seemed like they had brought them along. She stood up and checked her phone, texting her mother the latest incident of Rick's violence. Her phone rang almost immediately after she hit send. Her mother always did this. She always wanted to talk things out, which, to Cora's mother, meant talking fast in one breath and not letting anyone else get a word in. Cora ignored the call and sent another message. She placed her phone down and went to the kitchen for a beer. She leaned against the counter and drank it, thinking about nothing. The pain in her cheek was already fading. Part of her wished it would remain, a reminder of what she had just gone through. If the pain remained, Rick couldn't deny hitting her. This wasn't the first time he'd struck her. After she'd admitted to having a one-night stand with her old coworker, Rick had flipped out. She could swear she was still tender in her ribcage from that day. She finished her first beer and opened another one. As she sipped, a curious feeling came over her. She wasn't sure, but she could swear that the apartment got warmer. She walked to the middle of the apartment and felt a noticeable difference in temperature. She stood there for 5 seconds before feeling that same warmth envelop her again. This time she gasped. It was as if someone had placed a warm blanket around her shoulders. She hugged herself and went to the couch. This time, the warmth followed her there. Her mind immediately drifted to ghosts. It was silly, but she thought of cold spots in houses and then ectoplasm. She laughed. Sure, a ghost that makes warm spots instead of cold spots. How rational. Her attempts to laugh it off failed. Not only was she warm, but she suddenly felt safe. She felt like she could be airdropped into the Vietnamese jungle with just a toothpick and face down a tiger with ease. With this feeling coursing through her veins, she fell asleep, her empty beer bottle rolling onto the floor. Everything happened at once. The train rattled on its rusted tracks, shaking the apartment building like an earthquake. At the same time, the front door burst open so violently that it swung into the wall. Cora sprung awake, disoriented and half-conscious. She looked towards the door and saw a large silhouette blocking the light from the hallway. "What?" she said. The massive form thundered forward unsteadily. Its breathing was ragged and its shoulders hunched. It took entirely too long for Cora to realize it was Rick. Cora sprang to her feet, making sure to grab the empty beer bottle from the floor. She held it by its neck and raised it like a weapon as Rick approached. "You bitch," Rick said, his words slurred. "You bitch," he said again, his voice more sure and steady this time. He lunged for her. She swung the bottle with all her might, but never made contact. Rick grabbed her forearm and twisted. Cora screamed, dropping the bottle onto the floor with a clatter. She began struggling with her boyfriend, his larger frame and strength overwhelming her. They swung around the apartment in a strange dance, Rick's drunkenness severely impairing his ability to do severe damage. The door slammed shut, and Cora had a brief moment of confusion. Who had shut the door? The apartment's windows began to rattle in their frames, the sound almost as deafening as the passing train. But there was no passing train. What was shaking the windows? Their struggle continued. Around the apartment they went, crashing into the small round dining table, overturning the large potted plant near the front door, tussling the sheets off the bed. Books flew off the shelves. The curtains billowed in a fantastic wind. The bathroom door swung open and shut as if on a motor. Cora noticed none of these things as she grappled with Rick. His stubbornness threatened to overwhelm her at every turn, but he always tripped up somewhere. He lost his balance multiple times and stumbled as if struck. He must be drunker than he looks, Cora thought. The apartment continued to rattle in its foundation, attempting to subdue the violence in its guts. "Why are you hurting me?" Cora screamed. "Why are you hurting me?" Rick said through gritted teeth. The apartment had had enough. It was time to end this. With a final thrust, the apartment leaned and swayed and pushed, causing the credenza with the record player to slide along the floor. Cora was flung out of the way with the help of a chair that struck her waist. The credenza's movement on the floor was swift. It struck Rick in the midsection, pushing him with such force that he stumbled backwards. He didn't have time to scream before he crashed through the window and down to the pavement below. Cora did scream, loud enough to miss the distinct thud of flesh and bone on concrete. The silence that followed was marred only by the sound of chilly wind rustling through the broken window. Cora hugged herself against the chill, but found that she didn't need to. She was enveloped by the same warmth she had felt earlier that evening, the warmth like a protective blanket over her shoulders. She surveyed the apartment. Books, furniture, and sheets lay in disarray. It looked like a hurricane localized only to this tiny apartment had traveled through the room. She sighed before hunting for her phone to call the police and an ambulance. The next few hours were a blur of police, paramedics, and concerned neighbors. The apartment was technically an active crime scene, so the mess remained for several days before the building manager was allowed to clean it up. The window was replaced. The blood was washed from the asphalt below. Cora emptied the apartment with the help of her friend Hal and moved back in with her parents to heal from her ordeal. The apartment observed all of these events in silence, occasionally enveloping its occupant with a warm embrace. Though it had only been a month, the apartment was glad to be empty again. It hoped it would remain empty for a while, but it couldn't be sure. For now, the apartment enjoyed its expanse. It enjoyed the newly buffed floors, it enjoyed the new window, and it enjoyed the peace and serenity of silence. The apartment did like people, but they did not remain for very long. The apartment sighed, hoping the next tenants would be nice. That was The Apartment. Please rate, review, subscribe, and tell a friend about this podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Night Boy.